So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to a very green and vibrant looking Hobbiton. It's been a while since we've seen this battle map, and I mean, it's one of those classic maps, but it's also rather simple in the way that it's laid out. It's very difficult for the defenders to win generally on it because there's no actual fortifications as such. They just have a slight terrain advantage, and when they're surrounded on all sides by well-prepared attackers, generally it doesn't go that well for them and the festivities are trampled into the mud. But we shall see if that happens this time. I mean, it also tends to be rather shorter in terms of, well, certainly 5v3s, and you can see that it's below 20k frames, so that's going to be the case this time as well. But also this vibrancy, by the time this one comes out, we will be into September to some extent, so in terms of the real life year, we will be marching ever onwards into autumn and winter to follow, so it won't be this green for that much longer, I fear, so rather fitting, I suppose. But yes, we're going through the defenders shortly after this. We'll go through the attackers first and foremost. Not really much need to talk about the map because it's one that's been in the game for quite some time and I've already gone over it a little bit. Anyway, we shall see if the defenders can post up in the right places. More of a scouring of the Shire type situation this, because it's going to be 3 Hobbit armies on the defence, and I believe it's entirely an Isengard force on the attack. Sanket, playing as the first Isengard army, champions of the White Hand, are actually a pretty good choice. I mean, cavalry for the attackers certainly is a good choice here, because it means that any gaps they can find in the defenders, which can appear, can be ruthlessly exploited, and preventing any sort of sally out is one reason you want to bring cavalry as an attacker anyway, so the champions of the White Hand can do both of those jobs very adequately on a map like this. Uruk-hai pikemen, they can't quite blanket every part of the map they may like to in pikes. Even Isengard, being a pike-focused faction, are probably going to struggle a little bit more to do that. But pikes are still going to be one of the very useful things for forcing the hobbits back up the hill and bottling up the map in the way that Isengard would want a couple of units of them there. Half-orc Vaneguard, I mean, to be fair, the hobbits don't really have a great deal of armour on their side, so I don't really think that armor-piercing shock infantry of the like that Isengard have several units of is not really going to be all that useful. Certainly not the basic ones anyway. When we get into the higher tier ones they will be, just on account of their sheer quality, but Vaneguard and the like are going to be more easy prey for the hobbits to deal with potentially. The Uruk-hai infantry, on the other hand, are a better choice. They are heavily armoured and shielded to withstand a lot of the hobbit projectiles that are going to be coming their way. But they are susceptible to the armour-piercing melee weaponry that the hobbits also tend to traffic in, but most of the hobbits are going to be of a lower tier nature than the Uruk-hai infantry, so in terms of heavy-duty quality, Isengard will be feeling quite comfortable with their choice of having a lot of Uruk-hai infantry here. Uruk-hai crossbowmen, there's not really many places to hide on this map, so I don't know how the hobbits intend to go after the crossbowmen, but they're going to need to somehow, because if Isengard are able to ring Hobbiton with crossbows and then simply shoot into them, it's only going to be a matter of time really before the attackers overwhelm the defenders, whether they do so with Bjornings and Great Eagles on the sally out, or whether they just do so through sheer volume of counter skirmish fire. They are going to need to find a way of trying to shut these crossbows down if they are to have any chance. The Uruk-hai archers, in terms of long-range archery, the hobbits certainly have an advantage over Isengard for the most part, and the Uruk-hai archers here will just be there to try and skirmish with the enemy, waste a bit of ammunition. They're not going to be match winners, but they will be a vital cog in the machine of Isengard's war effort here. Some half-orc spear guard, like I said with the Vaneguard, they're an armor-piercing unit, but the spear guard being a far more defensive one with that shield could be very useful, and also the hobbits do have some fast-moving cavalry. Not many options, but the Great Eagles and the Bjornings are dangerous enough to the point where you might want to guard your flanks with a unit like this, just to get in the way initially, and obviously when you bog down cavalry in melee, even standard spears can do very well against higher-end cavalry. More crossbows there. Here we have the Uruk-hai berserkers. Like I said, armor-piercing shock infantry may not be the most useful thing in the world against the hobbits, but I will say that the sheer quality they have, the 3rd hit point, means that if they do get into melee quickly enough, they will still be effective against the hobbits, but they do need to be careful, because the complete lack of defensive skill and any armour means that as soon as those 3 hit points are gone, the hobbits have got a lot of options to scythe through the Uruk-hai berserkers. And at the back, the general's unit is the Guards of Orthanc, and this may be the more prudent pick, like I said, dealing with stuff like the Bjornings and the Great Eagles. The Guards of Orthanc are one of the better options Isengard have for that outside their pikes. very defensively sound against all of the Hobbit projectiles, and the sheer armour-piercing power of the Nazkai may not be the most useful thing for dealing with the Hobbits here, but the Guards of Orthanc do have a lot of utility. The second Isengard army will be moving through ever more quickly. I mean, the Dunlanders, which, to be fair, Isengard and Dunland very much of a piece here. Spears of Orthanc, very much like the Guards of Orthanc, only they also come equipped with a crossbow, which, for the same reasons we've already talked about with the Isengard Uruk-hai crossbows, Spears of Orthanc could be very, very useful. Dunland, a very numbers-heavy faction, lots of their number can hide as well. Baneguard and Spearguard we've already spoken about with Isengard, and they are no different in the hands of Dunland. I don't think there's anything else we can see. Possibly Gwathlo trackers and Trollshore axe throwers will be very useful at whittling down the Hobbit front lines, and the mounted version of the Spears of Orthanc that we've already seen, the Riders of Orthanc. Again, going to be useful for shutting down any sort of sally outs. They're also pretty good in melee with other cavalry. You know, the Orthanc units for Dunland are genuinely exceptional units, very multifaceted both, but then the rest of their roster is entirely borrowed, so it makes sense that that would be the case. Now, we have another Dunland army played by Diego Rio Ramos, at least from what we can see. He has got some Dunlanding clansmen, pretty good against cavalry, but again, very much a fodder tier unit. The Dunlanding veterans will actually be quite good at dealing with a lot of what the Hobbits have to offer. They've got that enhanced damage that a lower end line infantry unit can get by wielding an axe instead of a sword, and because the Hobbits don't have any armour to mitigate any damage from the Dunlanding veterans, they should be a little bit more effective than they would otherwise have been. And the Dunman Spearmen, which in many ways are actually a worse version of the Dunlanding clansmen. There are more Dunlanding clansmen, and they have an enhanced bonus against cavalry. The difference being the Dunman Spearmen do have a shield, I suppose, but the extra numbers make up for that really when it comes to dealing with any sort of arrow fire. Is this a 6v2 now that I look at this? DF Mark, I mean, none of these armies I think are completely fully stocked from the attackers, so that would go a long way to explaining what the situation is here. We've got the Dunlanding clansmen here, Half-Orc, Spearguard, another Isengard army, of course, Uruk-hai crossbows and pikes. I think that the trolls are a good choice. The Hobbits do have options for dealing with trolls like this, but if the trolls are committed at the right time, they can get in, interrupt stuff like Proudfoot protectors. They can definitely do a lot of damage to the squishy Hobbit archers, but there's enough armour piercing in the Hobbit roster to the point where the Trolls of the White Hand need to be used carefully. They can't just be committed unthinkingly. Mark has gone for the Nazkai. Like I said, they may not be as effective, but the same principle applies as to the Berserkers in the sense their sheer quality and damage dealing potential is still quite high, so the Hobbits will be looking to shut them down pretty quickly, I'd imagine. More Dunlanders and Uruk-hai infantry, as well as more Berserkers. Another unit of Champions of the White Hand, and the Lurtz Hunting Pack, which body-piercing projectiles on a more open settlement like this could very well prove to be utterly devastating to the defenders. We shall have to wait and see. Now then, we have Last Dark Lord, who has got some Uruk-hai crossbows. Would the Last Dark Lord be an Isengard force? I don't know. Uruk-hai Berserkers, I guess they were still somewhat active after Sauron's fall, but I'm not sure you could call anyone a Dark Lord. Dunlanding clansmen, Dunlanding veterans, a fairly full army this actually. Uruk-hai infantry and more clansmen, so a good mix here of pikes, lower end Dunlanders, and solid Uruk-hai as well, with some half-orcs in here for some extra utility. Like I said, the Baneguard might not be as effective in this matchup, but the Spearguard still very useful. And another unit of Guards of Orthanc as well. So I like this army, I have to say. It's fuller than a lot of the others, and they have a good opportunity to get crossbows into position and pin the enemy down. And finally, we have Two Times here, who has got some Dunlanding veterans as well. He's got a large box formation with the Uruk-hai crossbows on the flanks, the infantry, which will probably try to rush down the enemy up the hill as quickly as they can, but this is probably the worst position to be in as an attacker because the elevation is so extreme and you're fully in range of the defenders right from the off, but then it also makes your job quite simple because all you need to do is charge up the hill and try and outlast the enemy as best you can while your allies make their way through the slightly more favourable ground. Half-Orc Spearguard and more infantry, and another unit of Champions of the White Hand, so plenty of cavalry, and that may prove to be very necessary here with more Nazkai as well, because I'm imagining that the two Hobbit armies that are on the defence are going to have quite a few Great Eagles and Bjornings at their disposal. Two Mihai and Winged Swordsmen are the two players on the defence. There's going to be plenty of Hobbitry in arms, which are going to be the ablative armour front line, really, that are going to be there just to stand in the way while other stuff does the damage, namely The Proudfoot Protectors are going to be absolutely vital to the Hobbits' chances of being victorious here. Their crossbow bolts and then their pikes later on will be very, very needed. The Great Eagles, I think, the battle may be won or lost for the defenders based on how effectively they can charge in with their eagles. I mean, we saw in a recent battle on the Cardland outpost that even when they're caught out and not really used ideally, just a few charges is all it takes to devastate a few units, and that's going to be vital here if the Hobbits are to have any sort of success. More Proudfoots, the Ents, we've already seen a unit of Trolls on the attack. The same thing can be said of the Ents if they're committed at the right time, especially against these squishier units from the likes of Dunland. They're going to do a lot of damage very quickly, but then this is also where the Nazkai and the Uruk-hai Berserkers could really earn their keep. We have got some Farmers of Buckland. All of this armour piercing will be very useful against the heavier Uruk-hai elements of the attacking force today. More Great Eagles, more Proudfoots. I mean, there's a ton of Proudfoots. They're going to be able to go into the red limit so heavily on this because it's a 6v2. Whether that will be enough to tip the balance in their favour as the battle goes on, we shall see. Body piercing projectiles of the Dunedain Rangers, very, very important for any defending force, especially given the odds are what they are in this battle. The problem is, Rangers usually have the luxury of forces being funneled into individual areas, whereas in a more open area like Hobbiton, that's going to be a little bit more difficult for the Hobbits to drive the battle in that direction. But we'll see. Farmers of Buckland, we have some Band of Brass archers, more Hobbitry and arms battling. Brandybucks are the lower end shock infantry unit, but still arm piercing will be useful. More Ents, we have more battling Brandybucks guarding the lakeside. In and amongst the vegetable patches we have some Farmers of Buckland, more Tookish hunters, some Ents, Longbottom mob up on the side, obviously throwing projectiles, something else the Hobbits can traffic in very successfully. Both layers of their archers, we've got the battling Brandybucks. The Sheriffs of the Farthings are a throwing projectile cavalry unit, not javelins, but you know, they throw their pebbles. They're pretty good at dealing with other cavalry usually, but when said cavalry is champions of the White Hand and riders of Orthanc, it's going to be very difficult for these sheriffs to really do the business, unfortunately for them. But we'll see. I mean, the odds are all already firmly against the Hobbits anyway. The Proudfoots, however, there's so many Proudfoot protectors that could be a real problem for the attackers. A hailstorm of crossbow bolts awaits them, and the archers are also there in close support as well. The red limit must have been demolished by all of these Proudfoots that we're seeing. And yeah, more Longbottom mob and Farmers of Buckland. The Hobbits can of course have units that hide very easily, especially in the more heavily wooded section of Hobbiton over here. So yeah, I mean, we're not going to have to wait very long because of course many of the attackers are already fully in range of the defenders. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road. So this is certainly going to be one of those battles where we shall have to make very liberal use of half speed, purely because there's going to be so much going on very quickly, with 6 attacking armies bearing down on the 4 hobbits as the battle gets underway. But, as also was mentioned, the Proudfoot Protectors are immediately going to be in range of the Isengard force, and they can pretty much have their pick of the targets that they could choose to go after. Now, I would imagine that we're probably going to be seeing them go after the Uruk-hai pikemen, and while there may be Dunlanding veterans in the way, when it comes to dealing with crossbows, it's not really too much of a problem. Once again, we're seeing the dreaded frame drops, but hopefully that will stabilise as the battle goes along. It won't be long now before I get to put this old piece of junk in the bin where it belongs, but yes, we can see that the Great Eagle's already starting to fan out and make the initial attempts to charge into these attacking armies, and they are going after the more substantial ones. Uruk-hai crossbows represent obviously a very big threat to the defenders, as much as the Proudfoot Protectors are going to be very, very key. The Uruk-hai crossbows could very well prove to be the sort of unit which makes it kind of impossible for Isengard to continue, or impossible for the Hobbits to actually get any sort of victory here as the Dunlanding veterans. The Ents are bearing down upon them, the Bjornings are on the way, we can see the Great Eagles feasting on more Uruk-hai crossbowmen back there, and I mean this is the problem for this Isengard army. If they find themselves getting focused down by all of these high-end Hobbit units, there's not really all that much that a single army can do to defend themselves against this, but it does mean of course that the 5 other armies are going to be substantially better off in that regard. As the Dunlanding veterans continue to make their way up the hill, so far the Proudfoot Protectors continuing to shoot down upon the advancing Isengard forces, but they will make it to the front line, and like I said, the Dunlanding veterans, in spite of the fact that they are a relatively unremarkable unit in the grand scheme of things, who will actually do quite well against most of these hobbits. The armour-piercing hobbits tend to traffic in won't be terribly effective against the Dunlanders, and the slightly increased damage values they have owing to their axes will be important as well in this fight. There's also the archers that are firing away on something. I don't necessarily know what, but so far a lot of the attacking armies still taking their time. Haven't seen the Sheriffs of the Farthings break from the tree line on the other side yet based on the mini-map. The Champions of the White Hand charging forward, exactly the sort of thing which can ward off the Great Eagles and the Bjornings. Actually, this one unit of Dunlanding veterans there has been utterly crushed under the paws of these bears and the roots of these trees. The Great Eagles now leaving this area as well. You can see how devastating the Great Eagle charges can be, though. We saw it a little bit in the abandoned or semi-abandoned Cardland Outpost replay that came about a week before this one, where even when they were put under extreme duress in a bad situation, the Great Eagles were still able to get a couple of decent charges off. It ended up actually being very important to the outcome of that battle. The Great Eagles on this occasion again will be absolutely vital for the defenders if they are to win this fight, and they've already done so much damage to last Dark Lord's Isengard force, which, based upon what we could see anyway, was actually one of the more substantial of the attacking forces. And again, another decent charge there as it connects. Still, it's only this angle that has really seen much in the way of action. You can see 2 times this army has fully engaged with the Hobbit front line. It says victory seems certain for the Hobbits, but that's almost certainly due to the support coming in from the crossbows in behind. The Champions of the White Hand finding a few gaps. Longbottom Mob and Farmers of Buckland. It's hard for cavalry to charge up an incline like this, though, which is the saving grace of the Hobbits, really. If not for that incline, the Champions of the White Hand would have wrought a bloody harvest indeed there. But fortunately for them, they are now going to be able to get some genuine infantry units in the way. The Farmers of Buckland armour piercing will be useful actually against the Uruk-hai infantry, but the Uruk-hai infantry themselves are professional soldiers, so the lower defensive values of the Farmers of Buckland will also be coming home to roost here. You can see the Isengard forces creeping ever closer to the front line, and Banderbrass archers within the tree line are going to start firing away now. Less scary than the Proudfoot Protectors, certainly, but all of this damage is still going to be vital, and they're going to need to whittle down Sanket's army significantly before it arrives on the front line. The Sheriffs of the Farthings will be able to buy them a little bit more time as well. Isengard can't really afford to dawdle in the way that they are doing so here. Any Hobbit chance of victory will come at the hands of their very high-end units, but also their skirmishers. The longer that they're able to use their skirmishers unimpeded, the more chance the Hobbits have of going on to win this battle. Again, last Dark Lord continuing to send forward some individual Dunland units, but it's not going to end very well for them. You can see here another brutal charge there from the Great Eagles, flattening what was left of that Uruk-hai unit, and any Dunlanders in behind, yeah, they're going to end up routing. Part of the unit getting hit by Ents, another part getting a bit of that charge from the Great Eagles, and being followed through on by many angry hobbits wielding their farming implements. What's going on over there? Riders of Orthanc. Those crossbow bolts will be useful as well. The hobbits taking up a bit of a V formation on this hill, guarding their Proudfoot Protectors. You can see that there are a lot of dead Bjornings over here, so they were drawn into a combat situation that they could not win. So that was pretty good from the attacking perspective. The Riders of Orthanc doing their thing as they move backwards. Another unit of Bjornings is over here. They do charge in, but again, this is exactly the sort of engagement the Champions of the White Hand will enjoy. Riders of Orthanc, some Uruk-hai behind them, so this is going to be the end of this unit of Bjornings as well. Important units perhaps falling by the wayside here, which is not great for them. Great Eagles going off into the open field. Another unit of them over here. They can't afford to... they actually don't have a melee attack, so they can't actually afford to stay in melee with anything, the Great Eagles. But certainly not against pikes, because they are technically cavalry, so pikes will have a greatly increased combat effectiveness against them in melee. Champions of the White Hand are going to get a clean volley put into them, I would assume, by these Proudfoot Protectors. Having to arc their shots a little bit, but many of these bolts will surely hit their marks. Having to arc the shots does make them a little bit less effective, but dealing with this cavalry is going to be important. in two times' army, you had the least appealing route up to the main settlement. This one line of hobbitry and arms has not been sufficient to stop the march of Isengard. Shire are in here as well, Proudfoot protectors. I don't know whether they got to use all their ammunition before being called into service in melee, but the presence of these pikemen is sorely needed. I'm not too surprised to see them getting involved there. Longbottom Mob and Farmers of Buckland all using their armor-piercing. Sanket's army, actually two times, is the one who has swamped over this defensive position. And the fact that Sanket still hasn't arrived on the front line is probably the thing which is saving the defenders somewhat here. Not too much longer, however. You need to try and deal with two times as units that has managed to get in behind enemy lines here. They need these Band of Brass archers firing. They can't afford to have them getting cut down by all of these Uruk-hai. Javelins being utilised, the bandits doing their thing. It's a decent volley, actually. Decent number of those Uruk-hai falling by the wayside. They're not actually using the bridge across the Brandywine River to attack into the settlement. They're going to attack more from every other direction. The Sheriffs of the Farthing's coming over to this side of the field, which is probably for the best. They don't really want to get involved in the combat within the trees. The Ents and many of these hobbits are now in melee as well. And they will do pretty well against the half-orc spearmen. Again, that spear malice will be coming into effect against the Ents, which, much like the Great Eagles are technically cavalry, the Ents are technically infantry, so stuff like spearmen is going to be less effective against them. Hobbitry and arms meeting the advance of another unit of Dunlanding clansmen here. Farmers of Buckland moving forwards as well. They're doing decently in parts, the Hobbit infantry. The problem is, like, they're going to be exposed surely for their lower survivability with the numbers that are falling down upon them now. Still some Great Eagle units flying around. Just a random unit out there. Riders of Orthanc surely are going to be going after the Great Eagles, and indeed you can hear the thud of some of the crossbow bolts. Don't know where the others went. I mean, they can hide anywhere is the thing, so, but then this is the army from which we're viewing the battle from. Flaming shots and Gandalf's fireworks, which actually completely missed that unit in the competition, which I shouldn't be surprised that Gandalf's fireworks are here, and this is the ideal situation to be using it in. You're going to hit something and you need to get that damage done quickly, because if you wait too long to use your artillery, it's going to be basically useless. The Sheriffs of the Farthings are going to be using their projectiles as well, as now the Dunland army of Diego Villa Ramos falls upon the defences, and this is the problem. I mean, with a 6v2, there's just so much the attackers can throw at you. You need to be very careful here, because the Gandalf's fireworks, if you march your own unit through the artillery like this, it ends up absolutely eviscerating your own unit. Tumaheim might be about to learn a very painful lesson here. I think he might just get away with it if the Chunters can get out of the way quickly enough, but definitely not how you want your artillery to be wasted. It's better for it to simply do nothing than get a bunch of friendly fire. Meanwhile, the Great Eagles continue to do their thing, and they are going to charge in here, although that was more of a bump than a charge. And that means the Great Eagle's effectiveness completely evaporates, because they don't have a melee attack, so the charge is everything. If you don't target the right unit like that, they can end up being thoroughly wasted. The Nazkai still defeat seems certain, but that's mainly because I think they're being held at arm's length by all of these pikemen, and it's taken quite a while for the hobbits to actually do the necessary damage against them. Uruk-hai crossbows are getting charged, Snaga skirmishers getting flattened. Bandits are now rushing forward after utilising their javelins. They're going to try and do the business in melee against the Uruk-hai crossbowmen. They themselves are not amazing in melee here, the bandits, but it's all about combined arms. Trying to cease the Isengard guns from firing, as it were. Snaga skirmishers in a pretty good position here from two times. And these battling Brandybucks, the problem is two times has been able to surround some of these units, so what was going to be the initial front line against Sanket's advance has ended up being utterly dismantled as a result of gaps in the line further up the hill. And the battling Brandybucks, which generally speaking are going to be fairly efficient on an individual basis against all of these half-orcs, they're just going to, yeah, they're going to end up routing. Hobbit morale is not the best, so something else which will certainly be working against them. Bandits firing down from on high. Some of 2x units are going to be killed as a result of these offensive actions, but worthwhile, I have to say. Gandalf's fireworks definitely doing their thing. They're getting a lot of friendly fire, to be honest. They maybe waited just a little bit too long, but you need your firework launcher to be getting a decent amount of value off in a situation like this. So you have to use them and just hope for the best. Trollshort axe throwers taking a lot of damage from the archers up on the hill. Another example of a range threat that the hobbits can't afford to let be. The Trollshort axe throwers will be very good at dealing damage to pretty much everything the hobbits have. The Isengard trolls in here, this is a real mess at this point. The Isengard trolls going up against the Ents. The Ents are more depleted than the trolls are. They've been in combat for longer, but the trolls are also in amongst a lot of armor-piercing units here, and you can see that they are already starting to fall. So there is that. Dunland clansmen trying to make their way up the hill as well, but they are struggling. The morale of some of the lower tier Isengard units could also be called into question here. Farmers of Buckland continue to do their thing. The Dunedain Rangers are now in place, trying to shoot down the lines of all these Uruk-hai pikemen. I mean, the Uruk-hai pikemen are going to be the best choice of target. You can't afford to let Isengard get set into their pike lines in a battle like this. Getting bullied all the way back to the town centre at Bag End at the end of a long spear is not going to be what the hobbits need to allow to happen. The Proudfoot Protectors, I think, were firing for a little while there, but you can't protect all of these Proudfoots, and unfortunately for them it is also a unit of Uruk-hai Berserkers that have found their way through the line, in addition to some Dunland Spearmen as well. If they can get within swinging range of all of these Proudfoots, the Berserkers will be fairly ideal at dealing with the Proudfoots. Victory seems certain. Lurt's hunting pack on the way forwards. Going to try and get into a good shooting position as well. You can see how fragmented the Hobbit defensive lines are. Again, this is the problem of having to face down 6 armies. Covering every angle becomes very difficult, and if you do, it ends up being not enough to protect from certain angles. Like individual units of hobbitry and archers, we've already seen in this battle already, have been ill-equipped to deal with the level of units coming at them. Brandy Bucks over there. Vanderbrass archers and Tookish hunters, however, are in a good position to continue firing for quite a while. All the Hobbit front lines need to do is hold the line long enough for all of these ranged units to do their thing, after all. There's a lot of projectiles. And lending veterans creeping their way through the lines. There goes a Isengard general. I think that may very well be 2x, given that he is at the top of this hill over here. That was the Nazkai that continue to be bullied, although I think they are actually going to win now over here against these farmers of Buckland, but the loss of the general will be a tragic one. The Ents are in here. The Ents will make a very good tonic for dealing with the Uruk-hai pikemen that are over here, and it does look as though 2x main assault is crumbling away now. They've done a decent amount of damage and they've distracted the hobbits enough for it to be worthwhile, but has Sanket's advance benefited significantly from this? Diego Rio Ramos has also sent over some of his Dunlanders and half-orcs to assist. The Hobbit front lines are still holding, but I don't know, it's looking again fragmented over here. The Ents are over here, dealing with some Uruk-hai. Still a few champions of the White Hand over here. Another example, really, of a Hobbit defensive position that's eventually just going to be overrun through sheer numbers. All this is armor-piercing damage, which is going to be coming the Uruk-hai infantry's way. So there is that. Vanderbrass archers, Dunedain Rangers firing away. Firing right into the midst of that unit of infantry. Pikes are on the way forward. Maybe not the ideal unit to be going after Ents with, but Just continuing the advance, keeping up the pressure on the defenders. Line Rangers doing their thing. Proudfoot's firing through the trees. Still, these crossbow bolts remain the Hobbit's best chance at victory, I believe. Not seeing a great deal of the Great Eagles anymore. Again, they may very well be hidden from the player. Yeah, there they are. There's a unit of Great Eagles. Continuing to cause real problems in the back lines of the attackers. 2 units of Spears of Warthank there from Diego Villaramos, and they will be a good choice for warding off the Great Eagles, but more charges are going to be needed from them. Fireworks continue to be used. Plenty of good targets over there. The Uruk-hai crossbows in loose formation. Among the better ones, you can't really afford to get too much in the way of friendly fire now, so it's not a precision instrument, the Fletcher, anyway. The Hobbits continuing to struggle now as the Uruk-hai berserkers push their way further uphill. Hobbitry and arms will not be up to the task of stopping the berserkers in their tracks. Proudfoots are there. There's still a few Proudfoots actually. Seeing an awful lot of... it has been a very chaotic fight, this one, it must be said. The Ents are there. Hobbitry and arms just broke. Over 100 Hobbits breaking is not really the sort of sight the defenders would have needed to see if they were hoping to be victorious here. Still a Great Eagle. Sheriffs of the Farthings getting right in behind this unit of Uruk-hai infantry and using their projectiles, so I'm actually surprised. I thought the Sheriffs of the Farthings would be an utter waste in this battle, but some value is going to be achieved. You can see the more limited amount of damage that they do in comparison to Javelin cavalry. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Dunland Rangers getting hounded by half-orcs that have found yet another gap in the lines. Proudfoot's moving forward and getting a little bit closer to the action. Still, units like Riders of Orthanc represent such a conundrum for the Hobbits to deal with. I think the battle is kind of simple for the Hobbits, so they just need to do damage to Isengard in whatever way they can as quickly as they possibly can, otherwise they will just end up being overwhelmed. So the Ents are right in and amongst things. Surely this is going to be the end of this unit of half-orc spear guards, so they have managed to stabilise in spite of the earlier fragilities that were found over in this part of the battlefield. Snaga skirmishers are in close proximity to support. Great Eagles going to the relative safety of behind the hills so they can escape from the crossbows. Really? Surely not. Well, I guess so actually. Diego has managed to push all the way through to the TC. This is actually a valid strategy because there's no way the half-orc spear guard are going to be able to hold on to this town centre until the tick down happens. There goes one of the Hobbit generals. But it does mean that they're going to be forced to move some resources off the front lines, which would have been absolutely vital for holding on to them.
Our foe has lost control of the castle.
And there you go. So many arrows finding their way over here. And a fair amount of the attackers actually now routing. That will hearten the defenders. Uruk-hai infantry defeats a distinct possibility, and they will surely end up routing now as a result of this rear charge from the Brandy Bucks. The landing veterans still trying to clean up some of these units that are down here. They will manage it, but the Hobbits have actually clung on better than maybe I was expecting in many of these areas. Proudfoot protectors trying to hold on. They are somewhat surrounded though, which should take away a lot of the effectiveness from a unit of pikes. Crossbow bolts continue to rain down. Isengard chasing off the Sheriffs of the Farthings, but of course they can simply be kited around the battlefield. Champions of the White Hand will surely finally finish off this pocket of Hobbit resistance over here and free up all of this infantry to continue their march towards the TC. There's not even that many of them left. I mean, they should all be flattened here. The farmers are battling to lock morale unit, because I can't imagine that most units would stay fighting in a situation like that. That would be a little bit of trivia that I was unaware of. Victory still seems certain for the Uruk-hai Berserkers, despite the fact that they're surrounded, but then most of the Hobbit units that are facing off against them are punching well above their weight class here. Rangers going to try and get back into position. I mean, for all of the fragmented nature of these front lines, the attackers have huffed and they've puffed, but they haven't actually managed to get through the Hobbit defences just yet. And the extreme level of routing which has taken place over here, probably at the hands of Gandalf's fireworks. Nazkai also getting overrun with sheer numbers there. Hawk Spearguard, victory seems certain. The bandits, the ones that reclaimed the town centre from the Half-Orc Spearguard. I mean, the Half-Orcs should win this fight, really. But at the very least, it will buy a little bit more time for the defenders to not have to send a unit down here to deal with this annoyance. Once again, the frame rate starts to judder a little bit. Proudfoot Protectors still with their pikes out. Half-Orc Spearguard looking like they may rout. 98 of them wavering, again, routing off units like that. One of the ways that the Hobbits can really start to even the odds a bit. Farmers of Buckland continue to push forward with the Ents. Although Baneguard will be better against the Ents than most other Isengard units that armour piercing from those spiky maces. Useful. Defeat a distinct possibility. For the Brandy Bucks as yet more Baneguard head to the front line. Spearguard continue to push forward, managing to engage the Rangers. Don't know if the Rangers used all their ammunition. I don't think they did though. So this will be a very important catch as well for the attackers. Proudfoot's in a rather weird formation. Almost like Skiltron formation, which is lesser seen now than it used to be back in the day. Uruk-hai pikemen don't seem to be dealing very well with it. So it may look goofy, but if it works. Finally, this unit of Farmers of Buckland and the battling Brandy Bucks that were fighting alongside him are going to be overwhelmed. The addition of some Uruk-hai archers in melee of all things. Finally, what's tipping them over the edge? You can see the Great Eagles. Going to try and get a charge off into the Uruk-hai Berserkers, perhaps. And they will succeed. An important unit to try and defang, because they look fairly fresh as well. Not a huge amount of kills done on them, and they need to cycle back out quickly, because the Berserkers will do a lot of damage in return, but definitely the kind of unit they need to try and whittle down before we get into the decisive moments of this battle. Spears of Orthanc also stand ready, not the sort of unit which the Hobbits can really deal with in melee either. And the bandits almost completely gone, which will mean that the town centre will fall back under the attackers' control. And there's another attacking general. Ever decreasing that morale. Watcher must have used up all of its ammunition now. I mean, like I said, the large-scale routing over here, in no small part due to the Watcher. Vanderbrass archers using their clubs in melee, but Trollshaw axe throwers in the background, Uruk-hai crossbows as well, so the attackers trying to make good use of their own ranged support as the battle wears on. Turkish hunters marching forth. Hobbitry and arms are routing and broken. And we have Proudfoots. best angle for them, unfortunately. Managing to rout off the half-orc Vanguard though, the Sheriffs of the Farthings, as they come in. Not exactly shock cavalry of the finest quality, but they're getting the job done. Going after these dregs will add up in the long run. You need to be careful not to get involved too much with Uruk-hai pikemen. Wavering or no, any touch from those pikes is going to mean death for the Sheriffs. Turkish hunters moving forward to get involved in melee. Not a particularly strong melee combatant, but everyone needs to do their part at this stage. Yeah, there's hunting pack are in place as well, which that's going to be a concern. They're a little bloody, but also able to shoot up onto the hill over there, and you can see now Hobbitry arms are routing. Backwards momentum from the hobbits, so you can start to see, I think, the attackers start to really swamp forwards, and there's not really much defending the town centre from this side once those defences start to falter and fade away. Still a few bright spots for the hobbits, but get a little bloody with the spears of Orthanc. The Great Eagles nearly a spent force now. Another charge coming in, though. They have been very useful here, the Great Eagles, but I don't know necessarily whether you need to get so much out of them in this sort of situation for them to be match winners. I mean, we'll see at the end, because we are viewing this from the Hobbits' perspective, and we'll judge them based on how many kills they've gotten, but it's been a tough one. Crown Foot Protectors continue to hold the line resolutely. I think at this stage actually we can probably go up to 1 speed. There goes the one Great Eagle that remains, and Uruk-hai are wavering. I mean, over 100 Uruk-hai routing off would be the sort of thing which would give the Hobbits hope. Another unit of Proudfoot Protectors coming down here as well to try and back up the Hobbitry in arms, so we're looking like they might rout off without support, but now the morale has been somewhat stabilised. Bandits, the balance of forces is evenly matched. There goes Samwise. Is it indeed? Longbottom mob, so there's still some range support coming in from the hobbits, but it's among the lowliest they can muster. And they still need something to really do more substantial damage to units like the Spears of Orthanc and Guards of Orthanc, the heavily armoured Dunlanders of Saruman's personal guard, still here in force, and that may be the final hammer stroke that ends the battle in favour of the attackers here. What have we here? Sheriffs of the Farthings. Still charging in and actually getting some good rear charges. They may actually be victorious over on this side, you know, the hobbits. There's still enough Proudfoot Protectors, and the support coming in from the Sheriffs may be enough to rout off these units. I mean, so the battle is most assuredly not over, but I mean, 6v2s are so tilted against the defenders, even with all of the red limit busting that they've been doing. Line Rangers coming in from the side, Lurt's hunting pack routing up, so actually, yeah, victorious there. Half-Orc Spearguard coming in for another bite of the cherry. There's still units at the top of this hill over here, so yes, they have actually been victorious over here, the hobbits, which is pretty wild, considering it looks as though they were chain routing just a second ago. There are more Half-Orc Spearguard on the way forward now, but that's pretty much it. The rest of these units can start making their way over to try and defend the town centre and put on a united front against the Orthanc forces, which are most assuredly going to be on the way. Even the artillery crew is still alive. Ooh, this heart was a bit of a concern. The town centre surely will be falling now. That unit of Half-Orc Spearguard being joined by a veritable swarm of Blackwolds. Blackwolds are the sort of thing which, without range support from the hobbits, are also going to be pretty difficult to deal with. They're going to be reliant almost entirely on the Proudfoots, really. Even if they still had Ents left at this stage, which they don't, they would be not the kind of unit you really want to be sending in against the Blackwolds. Nice rear charge there from the Sheriffs of the Farthings, though. Like, really did doubt whether they would be effective in this battle, but so far they've actually proven to be a bit of a lifesaver from the hobbits. You can see what faction the hobbits have replaced from vanilla medieval to. Weirdly enough, the Aztecs, of all things, based on the Aztec banners. Dunedain Rangers out of ammunition, but the melee defense will actually be helpful. Both hobbit generals are now dead. But if they're going to post up within the town centre, that won't actually matter. If you're fighting within the town centre, you cannot be routed. This unit of Proudfoot's surrounded and will surely be dealt with in short order. The Proudfoots once again really showing their worth here. They've been every bit really the equal of the Uruk-hai forces, but now the Spears of Orthanc, 2 units of them, gunning them down, firing at squad style. Uruk-hai infantry, still in decent numbers. They didn't end up routing in the end. Hobbits may live to regret that, and the problem is once the attackers take this position in the settlement, they can then shoot down into the town centre, so all of a sudden the terrain advantage actually flips in favour of the attackers if the defenders allow them to have that position unimpeded. They do need to clean up the town centre first and foremost though, which means dealing with all of these black wolves. Protectors. Several of them still have ammunition, to be fair. 3 units on them. I don't know how much ammunition, but it is worth using on a unit like Black Wolves, but I think at least one you should probably save for those Spears of Orthanc, which still linger on the periphery. Uruk-hai archers and guards of Orthanc on the way to put more pressure onto the defences, but those Proudfoot protectors in the distance ready to meet their advance. The artillery crew also join them in standing in the way of this latest advance. And now the crossbows also change their target from the Black Wolves to focus on the guards of Orthanc, which is definitely worthwhile in doing because the Proudfoots in melee will take a long time to kill off a unit which is as defensively sound as the guards of Orthanc are. Actually retreating from the crossbows as well. Most curious, Spears of Orthanc and Uruk-hai crossbows now taking up a very nasty position up on the hilltops over here. You can see this is the problem, they're now able to shoot into the Proudfoots, which represent the Hobbits' best chance of going on to win this fight, really. They need to try and respond to this somehow with something, the Hobbits, because I mean, not only are those Proudfoots vital from a range perspective, but they will need to be used as infantry later. Victory seems certain for the Black Wolves. The only thing they're really going up against here in the town centre is Hobbitry and arms. They will have to kill them to the last Hobbit, to be fair, but that isn't going to be too difficult for them, you would think. Uruk-hai crossbowmen standing there with some menace. Proudfoot protectors, victory seems certain. The last of the Sheriffs and the Farthings, and it was more of a desperate charge. In the distance we see Half-Orc Spearguard guarding against the Snaga. I think the attackers have got too much for the defenders. It's been a pretty valiant attempt though to 6v2, especially given the already difficult nature of Hobbiton to defend, even when it's more of a fair siege, quote unquote. But perhaps the unexpectedly savage nature of the Hobbits is what has allowed them to be pretty competitive in this situation. Guards of Orthanc crank their crossbows, ready for another volley. Are going to engage the Snaga in melee as well. Enough to rout them. And routing at this late stage is a very important thing to consider. Proudfoot Protectors having to engage with the half-orc spear guard. Crossbows are going to get engaged by Proudfoots, but they have to peel themselves off the admittedly very battered and bruised guards of Orthanc at this point. A few of them remain behind, but they are going to at least cease those crossbows from firing. Another column of Uruk-hai pikemen. I think these two units of Spears of Orthanc are proved to be probably a bridge too far for the Hobbits. If not for them, I think the Hobbits could very well have gone on to win this. The late game support from those Proudfoot Protectors up on the hill there, as well as them being involved in melee later on, that would have been about 150 extra pikemen that the Hobbits could have utilised, but as it is, Spears of Orthanc, who haven't truly been used in melee yet either, very much the difference maker in the long run here. Very close though, 2% the difference. That will climb to probably be 4% by the end, but that's a remarkably close battle for a 6v2. The Guards of Orthanc continuing to try and chase down the unit of Proudfoots that was savaging them in melee not too long ago. I mean, this is pretty much the entirety of the units on the battlefield now. Some Snaga, 2 units of Spears of Orthanc outside, 1 champion of the White Hand. Is that a general by any chance? I mean, it's kind of hard to tell because the champions of the White Hand and the like use the same model. It might be. I think the regular champions have got the White Hand logo on their chest. That might be the general. Which would explain why he's not being recklessly cast into the fighting. Defeat seems certain. I would say defeat is certain at this point, outside of all of the attackers suddenly deciding to forfeit the game.
The enemy is no longer in command of the castle.
I was going to say, I hope the battle noises fade back in there, but yeah. Unsurprisingly, the last Hobbits left standing will be Proudfoot Protectors.
Our allies have fled the field like cowards.
Tumahai's army falls, and it's just going to be these few Proudfoots now, going pike to pike with the 1 unit of Uruk-hai pikemen that remains, but it's still a relatively fresh unit, so unfortunate for them. 3% the difference. Hobbits managing to get that extra tick. What do they have left then? 1 guy? Okay, enough of this. He's in there, right in the midst of everything. The Uruk-hai seem a little bit confused. He manages to shank one as well. He's too small for the Uruk-hai to see when they're in a mob like this. The Uruk-hai prefer eating hobbits or humans? I was about to say the humans have got more meat on them, but I'm not actually sure. The hobbits eat so much that maybe that's not true. A few black wolves remain. And the scouring of the Shire concludes in a most unfortunate manner. And it wasn't a 6v2, I'm actually just a fool. An idiot, if you will. Why did I think it... I don't know. It's been a very, very long day. Anyway, doesn't matter. 5,000 kills for Winged Swordsman 44. That's a lot of kills. I mean, we'll see, I'm sure the Rangers probably pulled their weight, the Proudfoots probably did as well. Last Dark Lord was the one who drew the short straw, really, among the attackers. He was the one that was singled out for destruction, really, among the various Hobbit defenders. Lots of Great Eagle action coming his way. The rest of them getting a decent amount of kills, but then the Hobbit armies, even when they're on the defence like this, tend to be larger, so there is that to consider also. But yeah, let's see what did the damage for the Hobbits then. Yeah, over at least 239 kills for each of these units of Proudfoot, 707 on Dunedain Rangers, which is actually very impressive, given this isn't usually the sort of map which is conducive to Ranger play, but 707 kills for them, very impressive. The Ents did okay, 134 is kind of like the bare minimum of what you'd want from them in a situation like this. Several infantry units doing very well. Unsurprisingly, it was the armor-piercing ones that tended to do better. Some Hobbitry in arms getting over 350 kills. That's very significant. I assume it was on stuff like Snaga, but you never know. And then the Great Eagles was 727 as well. I mean, that's a sign that the Great Eagles were used very well. So there is that in their favour. 338 kills is still a very good return on the Great Eagles, and plenty of kills on these Proudfoots as well. Better from the Ents in her Mahai's army as well, with 366 kills. Everything else, Banderbrass Archers doing quite well. Gandalf's Firework Launcher 203, but that doesn't really count the morale damage they were doing. And then Darthy Darth 315, yeah, good kills on the Proudfoots. Dunedain Rangers a little less impressive, but 350 is still very much acceptable on a map like this, I would say. The Ents a little bit disappointing as well, 92. So yeah, you'd have to say maybe... Oh, Great Eagles 893, that's very impressive for a unit like that. Sheriffs of the Farthings, not many kills, but still very useful as a supporting tool late on. And yeah, just tightening up a few of those gaps on the hills that allowed 2 times to slip through their defences, and maybe getting a few more kills on the Ents would have been the sort of thing which would have allowed the Hobbits to turn this one around and go on to achieve victory. But as it was not to be. The attackers able to win. I still don't know why I thought it was a 6v2 throughout the whole game. I think I might be losing my mind. I think trying to do so many of these in quick succession is starting to rot my brain. Maybe it's time to take a break after this one. But yes, a good battle nonetheless, a nice theme to this one as well. This is actually going to be, in terms of the time sequencing, the last battle that I'm going to be recording on my old PC. I've elected that what I'm going to be doing is I'm still going to be doing the rendering and uploading on my old PC. I'm just going to transfer the files across via a drive that I'm going to use. But I'm going to do the recording on my current PC. This will mean that I can do the rendering basically and just use it as a workhorse, because it'll be fine for that. But the actual mechanical problems I've started to encounter on my old PC means I can't do the recording on this one anymore. And I will be starting to migrate that over to my new one. And hopefully this new workflow will be good moving forward. Hopefully it will take away some of the problems that we saw, especially in that recent Cardland Outpost one. I have come to the conclusion, though, that very rarely do we see the Cardland Outpost take place entirely within the settlement on that map, and I think the fact that it was a cityscape that includes a lot of the technique where they use a lot of fences to try and create the streets, that was always a problem back in the day, and maybe that contributed somewhat. It can't have been the only reason, though. I think it was a combination of that and the fact that my old PC is starting to give up in that regard. So I'm just going to be using it as a rendering and uploading workhorse from now on. I've still got one more battle replay to record on it, but that will be the one that will have come out the Wednesday before this. So that will be the last one. But other than that, I mean, this is all the sort of thing which you shouldn't notice any difference, other than the fact that hopefully the frame troubles that we saw at the start of this replay hopefully will not be a problem when I'm recording on my new PC. We shall see. It may be that limitations of the game are also playing their part, but I mean, this is what we will find out when I start recording on the new one, won't we? As for what's coming up soon, there's a few more replays that I have on the old patch of Reforged, which I'm going to be doing. Again, Winged Swordsman has sent me a few, which I've got to some of them, and I've done them a little bit out of order, but hopefully we'll be getting to all of them as well. I've been given a free-for-all on the Mountain Pass, which we're going to be getting to at some point in the future as well. There's one replay that I was sent a little while ago at this point from Silmarillion, which we shall also be getting to within the next month. And then moving forward, of course, one eye on the next patch of Reforged, hopefully a little bit more content from that to come. I realised that I actually messed up during that recording. Apparently Shader version 2 is not what I should have been using, and that's why The walls were all messed up in that replay, but you know, it is what it is, I suppose. As for other stuff, I mean, also with one eye on getting towards the end of the year, where there may very well be a bit of an overhaul in terms of what we're going to be doing, and hopefully that will benefit the channel in a positive way. So yeah, more Reforged to come, a little bit more Silmarillion, and hopefully we'll be doing a little bit more stuff from the latest patch of Reforged as we continue to march towards the end of the year, and hopefully what will be the promised land. We can only hope, right? Anyway, big thank you to Winged Swordsman44 for sending this one to me. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of this battle replay. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.